So I think that schools, especially at those lower levels, should be as apolitical as they can possibly be. And obviously, that's never going to be perfect, but we shouldn't be doing patriotic education or education around LGBTQ issues in those early levels, K through 3.
But how can you say that teachers can't impose their political values on students when that's the entirety of a teacher's job? I mean, if we're talking about like curriculum business, everything from, American history especially, but from like biology to science is contested by some group of people in this country. It seems like if the statement is like parents should have complete control over the curriculum that's taught to their kids, then there's no point in public education then. The point is to set a standard that all students are taught by so that we can have a basic expectation for people's competence and knowledge. If parents decide that, what's the point of it?
Well, I'd say that in certain issues, we're talking about the stuff targeted by the Don't Say Gay bill is LGBTQ issues, right? And whether or not kids should be told about gay issues and trans issues by teachers rather than by their parents at that young of an age.
To be clear, like the legislation against it is forbidding any discussion of gender or sexuality at that age, which is ridiculous. Discussions of gender and sexuality are omnipresent, from people talking about like where babies come from, or that they're having a kid, or that they got married recently. Any like playground discussion on boys and girls, or it's not nice to like hit a girl, or like anything like that. All of that by the name of the law, like it all fits that category. It's totally imprecise. It's just a way for the state to illegalize the specific discussion of certain minority groups, it seems.
Well, you mentioned the example of, how a baby is made. I also don't think that teachers should be telling kids how babies are made at that age, because that's not something that the average, kindergartner walks around knowing.
What about like remedial sex education in like second grade or something?
I've not heard of sex education in second grade.
Well, why not? It's pretty important.
In second grade, I mean, that's well before puberty has started. That's well before teachers should be exposing students to the type of thing,
Why?
Kids really shouldn't be exposed to sexuality that early on in life. There's studies, and I don't have them, I can probably Google it, that will damage kids' brain if they're like have early exposure to porn. And like I'm talking really early. I know we're not talking about porn, and I'm sorry to make that the topic.
Yeah, because like we're not, but sexuality comes up way before second grade. Like when I was in preschool, people would still like talk about, oh, is that your girlfriend? Oh, is that your boyfriend? Like that kind of stuff. The idea of the state stepping in and making that a felony, like any discussion of anything sexuality related, it's like really weird to me, considering the fact that it seems like it's been pretty normalized up until this point. We only very suddenly have an issue with it. And also, like, they should be getting sex education at that age. That's the best way to prevent them from being sexually abused, right?
Well, I'll start with the first issue, which was that. Sorry, the first issue you were saying that kids should. Okay, well, we'll start with just the kids' education.
The only
Sorry.
just
call it COVID brain fog.
No, it's totally fine. I just want to say, keep in mind that whatever case you make has to be worthwhile enough for a totally unprecedented state law imposition threatening to charge teachers with felonies for bringing this up. So we're not only talking about, well, is it appropriate, is it not? There are lots of things you can do that are inappropriate that don't get felonies thrown at you by the state. You have to justify like an insane level of threat in order to approve this like state authoritarian bullshit.
Okay, sure. So if you mentioned, kids in preschool saying, oh, that's my boyfriend, that's my girlfriend. If two kids that had that sort of thing going on, like, oh, they're quote unquote dating in preschool, whatever, that happens, kids are kids. And they went up to a teacher and a teacher encouraged that in a sexual way. Do you think that would be okay?
We're not talking about in a sexual way. Sexuality doesn't mean that things are done in a sexual way.
I would say that all of it surrounds, I mean, you mentioned sex education in the second grade, so that was my interpretation, is that you're arguing that those sort of things should be sexualized at that early of an age.
Yeah, sex ed is one thing. You're talking about directly referring to two children's interactions with each other. That can be sexuality, but not sex. Like you're mentioning sexuality. If you're like a female teacher and you bring in your husband, you're like, hey, this is my husband. That right there is a mention of sexuality, flat out. That doesn't mean you're like having sex in front of the kids or whatever. That just means sexuality got mentioned, because that's what you're doing when you indicate that you have a husband.
Okay, I think you're right about that. The distinction, definitely.
So, It just seems
Go
weird
ahead.
that there'd be like a threat of felony over this.
Yes, I think what the idea of it targeting is, and again, the laws vary in specifics, but teaching kids about something that is controversial, such as, transgender stuff, telling kids that they can be transgender at that early of an age. Like, again, we're talking about kindergarten. I'm someone personally, I'm not against, I'm pro-gay. I absolutely am. Like, if that's the lifestyle that people want to live, I mean, I have friends that are gay. Like, if that's the lifestyle you want to live, absolutely go for it. But at that early of an age, I just don't think that teachers should be teaching kids that, imposing their own political values, instead of letting parents dictate that and teach their own kids in a separate setting from school.
But we've already
And I
been on this
understand I
point.
reverted back.
Yeah,
But
the teaching of political values is
yeah,
always the case when we talk about these teachers'
yeah, I
curriculums.
don't think that's true.
It is. They would say the same thing about teaching evolution. They would say the same thing about teaching anything involving climate science or the recent changes to the climate, anything involving U.S. history, like the Civil War or the Civil Rights Act, especially. There's no getting around the political nature. We need to talk about actual harm. Because if the harm here is some people might disagree, then my response, of course, is like, well, I don't fucking care if they disagree. I need to be explained to, like, how does it harm these kids? And as for like teaching these kids like, oh well, you could be trans. Well, first of all, I don't know how often this happens. When I talk to cons, it seems like they think it happens 24/7. I think like the actual context of this discussion is like, well, anyone could be gay, right? Like a teacher
Mhm.
could be talking about, well, a lot of boys like girls, sometimes boys like boys, and like, that could be anyone or whatever, and then that gets interpreted as the teacher like grooming the kids into being gay, when in reality they're making a truthful statement.
Yeah, the point where I disagree with you is where you say that it doesn't matter if people disagree. Because when you look at a state like Florida, where there's a substantial portion of parents that would be against, transgender people becoming trans fundamentally, which again, I'm not, but when you look at that, I think there's an issue with schools taking in the kids and then teaching them values that are contradictory to their parents.
Why
I
would
do
I
find an
care?
issue in that.
Like there are a lot of people in Mississippi who think that the North started the Civil War. Does that mean they should like teach fake history? Why are the opinions of the parents at all relevant?
Because they're funding it.
That doesn't matter. It's public education. That would be like saying that because the majority of people don't agree that a crime is okay, that the cops shouldn't like enforce it, or because the majority of people don't like a
But
given like politician, that they should just like ignore any laws or edicts passed by it. It doesn't make sense. The institution is not one which parents have a say on. We have educational professionals. Like, why would we defer to the majority there? They could be wrong. They are wrong here.
well, I don't know if this is this way in every state necessarily, but parents do and should have a direct role on public school education because it is being funded directly within the jurisdictions. I mean, they go forward, they vote for school board members, and then they'll directly elect school board members who set policy for the schools. Like that is directly giving them a say in the public education system.
Yeah, and
The issue,
if those elected people want to make those decisions, then they have to do so through existing processes, not by like a governor arbitrarily like deciding for its people like, well, we are now going to politicize education by threatening felonies for teachers who don't follow these guidelines. If we have a system of public accountability, then stick by it, or not. Because that system of public accountability wouldn't allow the Republicans to do what they really want to do, which is threaten teachers into shutting up or being arrested.
I don't think that's the logical extreme of that, but
That
regardless.
they're doing it. It's already happening. In Florida, it is a felony to talk about some fairly reasonable topics with young people, or to even have books with the subject matter present in it. It's happening right now.
If you take a system that is funded by parents, that has school board elected officials,
Funded by
that
citizens.
elects, funded by citizens, yes, that's absolutely fair. The citizens being the people who are then sending their kids to the public schools. And then you have school board officials elected. The issue is that the school board officials don't have the power to make these sort of things illegal. Because school board officials, they do have a degree of power. They can set curriculums, but they don't have the power. They certainly don't have power to make it criminal, but I don't think they have the power to ban and enforce.
That's because
And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on
we
that. They don't
live
have the power to ban and enforce a ban on like discussing transgender issues in the jurisdiction.
That's because we live in a free country, and it shouldn't be possible to do that. Like what you're saying right now is like, yeah, we had to go over that. We had to supersede that like system of checks and balances because we need to have the power to arrest teachers for not teaching doctrinally acceptable information. I don't think
You should
I
be
don't think
able
that
to
power
prevent
should exist.
teachers. I think that if school board officials, you're counter to my previous point that, well, school board officials are elected. They don't have the power to do it. And I don't think the free
No,
country is
no,
changing to that because the system is being funded by the parents.
you should not be able. No. The fact that
Okay, right.
taxpayers fund public schooling does not necessarily lead to it should be okay to charge teachers with felonies for teaching subjects parents in a district disagree with. That's insane. That's an insane, you realize that, right? Like this is like full on like totalitarian logic where like, well, for the be it the Aryan people who send their children, it'll be the Aryan people's interest who dictates whether or not degeneracy gets taught to your kids. It's like the same logic that totalitarian governments have used in the past. It doesn't follow.
I actually do agree that it shouldn't be a felony. But would you agree then that it's fair to remove the teachers from being teachers for teaching things that, let's say, the school board would disapprove of the district, the parents, the citizens of the district would disapprove of? Would it
No.
be fine to remove them from the teaching post because they're being paid by the citizens to teach the children stuff that the citizens in this case, transgender issues that the citizens disagree with?
They are being paid to fill a certain role, which is to make sure that the students are educated on the curriculum topics. As long as they're doing that, they're doing their job. If they're doing something inappropriate, then it should be judged by the existing standards we have to determine what's inappropriate. Like if they're harassing children or being super rude or they're intolerable to work with. But saying, yay, everyone, like anyone could be gay, who knows? That doesn't meet those standards.
So not in the curriculum to talk about transgender issues in second grade.
It's not in the curriculum to talk about what you had for breakfast that morning, but second grade teachers will bring it up anyway. I don't think teachers
And
should
that's what I'm
lose their
saying, is that
job over
that's an issue
mentioning
they
something.
shouldn't bring up.
So what they had for breakfast, they should lose their job for bringing up what they had for
No,
breakfast?
they shouldn't bring up transgender issues separately from the curriculum.
You failed to explain to me in any way how it's necessary to have this weird separate standard to like completely depose from education anyone who deviates from curriculum on this, even though no harm can be determined and we deviate from curriculum all the time. All teachers do. If teachers didn't deviate from curriculum, every course in America would be exactly the same. It's teachers' idiosyncrasies that determines whether or not students will remember them. By the book curriculum teachers are hated. Nobody likes them because curriculums are often like a very basic template you're supposed to build off of.
Sure, but with everything else I said building up to this about who's funding it and how the school boards don't really have power to enforce anything, I think that it's reasonable for...
You shouldn't throw out teachers.
Okay, that was the buildup.
Oh, okay, but you shouldn't throw teachers out for saying stuff that isn't in the curriculum.
For saying this specific stuff, not anything in general. Like, it's not just, you have to, read from a script the entire school year. I mean, that's ridiculous. But you shouldn't, if you discuss issues that the people that are paying you to teach directly, pretty much, I mean, the taxpayers, the people of the district, they should be able to enforce the sort of things you can talk about because it's their dime, it's their government that they're electing to teach their children.
It's public education. Should we not teach children about climate change? Or should we not teach them about education? Or should we not teach them about the civil rights movement? If like the constituency suddenly becomes very anti-Semitic, should we just be like, of course, now teaching that the Holocaust was real will get you charged with a felony? Like, why does empirical truth have to be subject to the biases and bigotries of like the dumb fucks who happen to pay their taxes?
Well, I'd say that public education exists to serve the people who are paying for the public education.
So you would be okay with the Holocaust teaching being fireable if America went anti-Semitic enough?
That's talking about a dystopian reality.
No, wait. You have to answer that. So based on your logic, that would be yes. You do believe that then.
I mean, I actually have to think about that one.
Really? You have to think about...
I do, and here's why. Because they're funding.
It doesn't matter.
Like,
No, the point of public education is to educate the public. If
like
if
I
you
would,
think like, oh, well, because the public is retarded, therefore we should teach the students retarded things, that's the opposite
I
of the
would,
point. Can you
yeah,
imagine when public education
I
started
would.
really becoming a thing back in the early 1900s? Can you imagine if they had to teach students stuff in line with what their parents believed? Oh my God. It would all be like, yeah, sprinkle salt on the entrance to your hallway in order to prevent spirits from like it'd be insane. Like no, the point here is to elevate people above the ignorance, not to wallow in it just because taxpayers are stupid.
I would say that the distinction lies in the extreme that you brought it to, because I would say, denying the Holocaust is orders of magnitude like worse than not teaching third graders that, transgender and gay issues, at least until middle school. Like, I mean, we're talking about kindergartners here, and that's an important part to remember. I mean, these people haven't hit puberty.
So they can have it mentioned to them. That's fine. If you're a kindergarten teacher and at some point the subject of gay people comes up and you're like, yeah, that's okay. Some people are like that and that's fine. I don't see what the issue is with that.
The issue is when teachers, use it as a platform for, I mean, I hate the word indoctrination, but that's really what it is. When we talk about patriotic education, as some conservatives have proposed, being, state indoctrination to be patriotic, which is, that's what it is. If we use the indoctrination word for that, then we can also use it for this.
What indoctrination is happening?
If a teacher actively promotes, issues such as being gay and being trans that are
Wait. The
contrary,
law isn't promotes. The law is mentions. Keep that in mind.
mentions as in like teaches.
No, mentions. The to the point now where like in Florida they're taking away any books that might have content that is considered by the state to contain any themes involving LGBT issues. That's not promoting. That's any mention of it at all. That's trying to excise any mention of it.
And I think the reason that they prescribed it that way, the reason that they put it that way in the law, is just to create no uncertain terms around teachers trying to teach it. Because I there is proof that before these sort of laws came into existence, and currently happening in states where these laws are not in existence, teachers at as low as the kindergarten levels are doing what could be seen as a sort of indoctrination
Like what?
into,
How is it so what is the
like,
definition of indoctrination?
I mean, I can literally Google that if you'd like, but if we're using the term indoctrination for patriotic education, then it can also be applied for this in the same
But I
way.
want to know what your definition of indoctrination is.
All right, let me look. One moment.
And how does it differ from just regular teaching?
Oh, that's actually a good definition, because, okay, the definition is the process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically, with the word uncritically underlined.
So like when Sesame Street says sharing is good, is that indoctrination?
I would say around controversial issues is where indoctrination can be applied.
Okay. So when Sesame Street back in the 1990s had a black kid on with the rest of the Muppets, and they had an episode that was about racial equality where they said we should all get along. That was a controversial episode that got like a lot of flack around the place. So that would be
It's interesting, actually.
indoctrination.
No, that wouldn't be indoctrination.
That
That's
was a
not.
controversial issue that they told people to accept uncritically.
I mean, that's also not in a classroom setting. That's Sesame Street. But
Wait, hold on. The definition of
I
indoctrination isn't limited exclusively to the classroom.
that's fair. Okay, in that case, we can say sure, and not all indoctrination's bad.
Okay. So, well, then I would fully agree with that. So, okay. If the message is sharing is good, could be considered indoctrination. The idea of we should all get along could be considered indoctrination. Well, then how about trans and gay people exist, and that's okay. If that is an uncritical value being put forward, which is controversial, if that meets the definition of indoctrination, then I will accept it. I will simply say that it is good.
Okay, and the reason that I'll say it isn't is, again, going back to the fact that these are young children being taught by parents.
So, who?
Sorry, being taught by teachers that are being paid by parents.
So
That so indoctrination on issues where again we go back to that fundamental issue, and you can just bring up the Weimar Republic or whatever it is. Excuse me, the teaching about Holocaust denial one again.
I mean, the people who agree
Yeah.
with you on this issue also are the ones who would deny the Holocaust, right? Like Holocaust deniers in the U.S. would say the
I
same
don't think
thing, like
so.
we need to protect our children from these values. But like,
I
okay,
don't think you could find Ron DeSantis denying the Holocaust, but
no, oh no, not in public. So okay, it's the late 1960s, it's post civil rights era, and integration is happening all over America. This is an extremely controversial thing. I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died an unpopular man. And
yeah.
all across America, you have teachers who are now having to deal with mixed race kindergarten classrooms that they have to teach. They express the controversial value of no matter the race, we should all get along. We all get along here. Parents are furious. Your ideology would lead to those teachers who paved the pathway for racial integration in America to be arrested or removed from their jobs because their indoctrination of we should all treat each other equally regardless of race was disagreeable to the parents.